Well, President Trump on Tuesday will address the United Nations General Assembly for the second time. His remarks coming as he faces a series of international challenges from North Korea, China, and Iran. Jillian Turner is in Washington with more.
The Trump foreign policy team's in New York City today for participation in the 73rd meeting of the UN General Assembly. President Trump's gearing up for what will be his second major address delivered to the global gathering of nations. Some of this year's themes may sound familiar.
The United Nations has tremendous potential, but it has not lived up to that potential.
President Trump faced backlash last year for what some countries perceived to be criticism of their internal affairs. But key national security officials tell Fox News the criticism isn't a deterrent and that this year they plan to hammer home an America First foreign policy. Their top priority is to highlight what they believe are their foreign policy successes. Top of the list is North Korea.
The administration's position hasn't changed one jot from the time we entered this discussion, but we've talked about particular facilities, particular weapon systems. Those conversations are underway, and we are hopeful that we can deliver this outcome for the world.
Iran also features on that list.
The Europeans have a decision to make, and I think that decision is already being made. If you look, they are dropping business from Iran left and right. Iran's economy is plummeting, and it's because they can't continue to sustain this. We're not giving them a pass.
Since then, the top foreign policy brass have all taken to the streets with the same message. They're recommitting to America First. Every time U.S. interests and priorities rub up against those of the international community, they insist the Trump administration will choose the United States. Eric?
All right, Jillian, thanks so much. Arthel?
Eric, and for more on this and what we can expect at the UN, National Security Analyst and President of IRIS Independent Research, Dr. Rebecca Grant. Dr. Grant, thank you for joining us. And
good to be here.
Absolutely. Earlier today, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN and former Governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson, told Eric that although some progress has been made, North Korea is not doing enough to denuclearize. So what will President Trump say about this in his address to the UN?
Well, Arthel, I think North Korea will be a big part of President Trump's address, and I expect him to give some praise to the UN and to the Security Council for sticking with the sanctions enforcement. He owes a lot to the ability of Russia and China to stay on board. That said, we know that President Moon will be around as well, and I expect he has some items to share with President Trump from the meetings last week. But, Secretary Pompeo said, if you read between the lines, that there is a lot of talking going on. He mentioned specific sites. And so I think that there is still a lot going forward with North Korean denuclearization, and I think it's actually still pretty much on track.
Still on track. Okay, let's talk about Iran. Should the president meet with Iranian leadership, and what's the likelihood of a sideline meeting between President Trump and Iranian President Hassan Rouhani?
Iran, what a question. Well, President Trump has said all along that he is willing to meet with any world leader if the talks can be constructive. So I assume that means he'd meet with President Rouhani. He would presumably even meet with the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, if he were there too. But that said, I don't expect this to happen. I don't see either of those gentlemen in Iran wanting to talk to Trump or the basis for cooperative action. Now, I would bet a quarter that there is strong back-channel communication, probably through a European intermediary, because European businesses are pulling out of Iran, and we see some very, very shaky action there. So I think the sanctions and Trump's exit from the Iran deal are having an impact.
But some of the European allies are concerned about that exit from the Iranian deal, nuclear deal, so they'll be watching to hear and see what the president says on that front as well. So let's talk China now. With the U.S. in a trade war with China, what are you expecting to hear from the president about China?
This is a great question and one of the big questions about what he'll say. I will be listening to see how much he talks about China. The fact is that President Trump has chosen this moment when we have a pretty strong U.S. economy to try to reset that long imbalance. Our trade deficit has been going up ever since China joined the WTO back in 2000. But I'm curious if he will take a real swing at China or if he wants to keep the trade war in bilateral channels. And don't forget, our European allies also feel the sting of this trade imbalance with China. So Trump is on very solid ground here as he seeks to find a better relationship with China going forward and to make things more even. We just can't go on like we have been for the past 20 years.
And quickly, will the president take the opportunity to warn Russia and other bad actors about interfering in our elections?
I think he will. He'll say North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, all comers, stay out of the midterm elections. I do expect him to say that, absolutely.
Okay, Dr. Grant, you're only betting a quarter? That's not a lot of confidence. I'm just saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Art Bell.